Today's date is the 20th of February 2012. We've had quite a bit of rain the last few days, and it's good to see that the sun is now coming out and we're starting to see some really nice green pastures, and it looks like we're going to have a nice crop of wildflowers this year. The Look For Me, I Will Find You project is coming along pretty well. There are obstacles, of course. There's always resistance. And by resistance, I mean you try to blow life into something and it's hard to get people to see the vision. That's okay, because I've got enough vision to go around. The progress that is being made is we finally decided on the patch that's going to be made. That's kind of the logo to go with the materials during the production of the film and during the promotion of the book. And I'm going to use that patch in the sale of the 4-book set. I think the patch looks pretty good. It represents the 4 covers, and the 4 covers, of course, represent the 4 stories. So I think it's appropriate, and I think the artist did a pretty nice job of bringing that all together. I started with a sketch, and I'm not an artist. I started with a sketch, just put some ideas together, and we went back and forth a number of times where the artist interpreted my ideas, and then I tweaked those ideas, and finally got to something that I think is really representative of what I had in my mind. What's funny about art is I can totally visualize a picture and totally visualize a painting, a drawing, a scene, but when it comes to putting that on paper, that's not as easy for me. For instance, if it's artwork, I can sketch a little bit, but my art is pretty amateur. And I don't know if it's that I just don't have the talent or don't have the technique. My mother was a pretty good artist, pretty good painter, and did all kinds of stuff during the course of her life, so maybe that's in the genetics, but I have found it a lot easier to visualize something and then go out and create a photograph that matches that visual image. And that's not easy to do, because you can certainly imagine more than you can have control over in developing a set. But I've had pretty good luck at doing that for years. I mean, ever since I was doing photographs for Dog Fancy magazine back in the 80s, I would conceive a illustration that would go with an article that I had written, and then I would go out and create that photograph to go with the article. That's one of the reasons that I sold so many articles to Fancy Publications. My editor there really liked what I was doing, and I asked her one time why she bought so much from me. We're talking a couple hundred articles that she bought from me over a course of I believe it was 7 years. And that's Fancy Publications own Cat Fancy, Dog Fancy, Horse Illustrated, Bird Talk. I wrote for all of those, did articles and photos for all of those. And what she told me is that the reason she bought so much from me is because my photos were so good. And usually I would write the articles and then conceive some photos to illustrate those articles and then go out and get the photos. And I used my dog Spot in a lot of photos. And my wife posed for me reluctantly. She never did like it much. I mean, she cooperated, but it wasn't her thing. It's not what she wanted to do. And so I know she did it just because she knew I needed somebody to help me express my creativity. And she told me one time she was really glad when I found somebody else to model for me, because she wasn't asked anymore, which is fine. It's not something that she enjoyed doing, even though she was pretty good at it. it's funny, early in knowing her, when we were still at Texas A&M, I had assignments from my photo classes in journalism, and I'd liked photographing people. You know, we'd get an assignment that says, go photograph, I mean, this is not the literal assignment, but it translates to this, go photograph cracks in the sidewalk, and it's like, or textures, or that's like, I don't want to do that. And so I would always work the project into photographing people. And one time when we had to do textures or something, I photographed eyes, close-up, super close-up of eyes, rather than, you know, cracks in the sidewalk. It just made more sense to me. And some of those photos were really good, and people responded. They liked those better than some of the other stuff that was done in the class. So anyway, early on when I was doing those kind of photos, my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, she was an acquaintance, she posed for a number of photos for me. And it's funny, just the other day I discovered that there was a leak in the roof in one of my buildings, and it's like, this is a epidemic, because in 2011 I found 3 leaks in 3 different structures. We had a bunch of rain recently, and I just went to that building just kind of on a fluke, and I went in there and put my hand on some boxes, and they were wet, and I thought, oh gosh. So that building is leaking now. And just prior to getting on the road, headed to pick up the newspaper and making this message, I've been up on the roof all day trying to repair it. Anyway, one of the things that leaked on were some articles that I had written back when I was in college in file folders, and fortunately the box resisted the water, and so I didn't, there wasn't any damage in the pictures or the photos. Unlike last summer when it leaked into a building we call the Cantina, I had photographs from NASA, I had original manuscripts in plastic boxes, and the water leaked into the top of the box, and because the box was plastic, the water just built up in there. So when I discovered it, they were literally submerged in water. I mean, these boxes were totally full. These are like, I don't know how to describe them, they're totes, and they have a folding top, so if water gets on the top, it just goes right through the crack. And they were literally full to the brim with all of these original manuscripts just sitting there, just submerged. And there were, I think, 4 or 5 boxes like that were full of water. It was a complete disaster. And I took everything out, and this was I want to say last July. And I took everything out and dumped the water out, and then I peeled the pages apart one sheet at a time, very carefully. You know, when paper is wet, it tends to shred. One page at a time, and let the sun bake it. And I was able to save most of it, or most of the manuscripts. I mean, they're legible. And when I say original, these are things, I don't have copies. This was the archive storage of the originals. The thing that was not saved were the photographs, because when the water hit the photographs, it just dissolved the chemistry on the surface of the photograph, just completely ruined them. That was the most devastating thing, because even though those pictures were from NASA, and the originals are at NASA, I mean, these are just copies that I got through press activity. You can't get them anymore. NASA doesn't do that anymore. These are things that go way back to the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. So anyway, that was devastating. So when I discovered the water in this other building, a building that we call the hotel, and the reason we call it the hotel is because it's blue, and I named it the Blue Hotel after a John Steinbeck short story or novel. Anyway, I found that the water had gotten in on some posters, some things that I had saved from when I was in Holland, and on this box of manuscripts. Fortunately, the manuscripts weren't affected too badly. Well, in that box of manuscripts, I found some of the articles that I wrote when I was in either reporting and editing, or I think it was my magazine writing course at Texas A&M in the journalism curriculum. And I found an article that I wrote about my wife as a Texas A&M pre-veterinary medical student, co-ed. It was a article and photo story, and I had forgotten that I had done that. Obviously, I remember that I took the pictures, but I had forgotten I wrote an article. I also found another article where she and I hopped a train, and the deal on that is that I had written a screenplay called Searching for Whales, and it was about a student who gets despondent and just basically says to hell with it and decides to hop a freight train and travel to the Atlantic coast and see if he could hire on a ship to hunt whales. Just an odd, quirky thing that he wanted to do. And now, mind you, this was a screenplay that I wrote when I was still in college. And we actually got together as students and we filmed that story, Searching for Whales. And all my friends were actors. I had a bit part in it. It was filmed on Super 8, and we didn't have any sound capability on film, so we filmed it silent, and then we attempted to dub in the dialogue, which of course was a near impossibility. So at the beginning of the film, I put filmed in a foreign language. So when the lip sync and the words didn't match, it, people accepted it. I had a little film festival that I did when I was in school. I was studying cinematography at Texas A&M, and I had a bunch of little short student films, and there were some other student films I think that I'd gotten from somewhere. So we had a little film festival, and gosh, we had 50 or 60 people show up. I think we charged 50 cents to come in, and that was just to help to defray the cost of getting the room or something. I'm not sure what. And my professor came, and he said it wasn't bad. I mean, the films were terrible. They were absolutely terrible. But the whole experience of projecting them to an audience and having the audience stick around and watch them was a lot of fun. But when I say the movies were terrible, I mean they just really were. Technique was bad, quality was bad. They were all cheap, no budget kind of films. Not like video today, where you can make some pretty good quality stuff and not spend a lot of money. Back then, you had to buy film and process it and go to the editing room and cut it, A and B roll it and print it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's what we did. That was the only thing that you could do back then. But Searching for Whales was played, and a bunch of the actors were there. That was probably the majority of the audience, is the actors and their friends. And we all got a kick out of it. We thought it was pretty cool, even though it was admittedly a terrible movie. And we kind of did it in the tradition of my brother. He had lived in the dorm several years before I got there. This is Leggett Hall at Texas A&M. And he had made two movies. I think one was called Oh, What a Lovely Bunch. It was a Western, and he used the Beatles music in it. And then the next one he did was Malfunction Junction, which was filmed when I was there. And I didn't act in it, but I was helpful in props and makeup and that sort of stuff. We had a scene where a guy flies off a 2-story building with cardboard wings, and nobody wanted to make the jump. We had gone to the athletic department and gotten some of those cushions that the pole vaulters use, and it looked pretty high up. Well, nobody wanted to make the jump, so I said, heck, I'll do it. And I went up there and I took the first leap and proved that, yeah, you're not going to die. But of course that wasn't filmed. And there were other things that I did. I helped on some of the writing. Malfunction Junction was also a pretty terrible movie. But it was something that the kids in the dorm did to pass the time on the weekends rather than just go nuts. And it was productive. And so my brother basically wrote and directed those 2 movies. I helped on the second one. Then he graduated and was gone, and then I did Searching for Whales. I was the writer-director on that one. And what I need to do is get it on YouTube. It's not there. I don't even remember how long it is. I think it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes, something like that. And just really a terrible movie. But we had fun doing it. We didn't have any ocean, and there's supposed to be a scene where this guy that skips out of school goes to the ocean, and so we drove down to Port Lavaca. Well, there were no waves, and it was laughable because he stands there talking to somebody and says, there it is, Atlantic Ocean. And it's not. I mean, it's a bay. But we had no money. That particular experience, I wrote a article and pictures which I sold to the Victoria Advocate. They put it on their front page of their Sunday Supplement magazine, which was cool because here, I think that was the very first time I ever sold an article and got paid. I was still in college, and it was cool to see the full front page of my photos and then inside the article and the photos. And we were all big heroes in Victoria. Now, why Victoria Advocate? I don't know. I sent the article out to a number of newspapers, and they're the ones that bought it. So it was from that beginning, taking pictures of students, stills for my photo classes, and then doing short movies for my cinematography classes. It's from that beginning that I got the bug to do motion pictures. I mean, I've always liked it. Gosh, my brother, when we were growing up, we made a movie called The Lizard That Ate Maintown. And I don't know how old I was. It was in Chicago, so the oldest I would have been was 3rd grade, however old you are in 3rd grade. And so we had a scene. Now, I say Chicago, I mean, I feel like it was Chicago, but now I'm thinking, you know, he didn't have that train set until we got to San Antonio. So that would have been the 5th grade. So however old I was in the 5th grade. And I played a news reporter. And so there's this real funky scene of me standing out in front of the Loop 410 with a microphone and a shirt and tie. I think I was wearing shorts. And I was announcing this lizard taking over Maintown. We used some chameleons to attack and destroy his HO Railroad train set. That train set, by the way, when we moved to Holland, my dad sold it to a friend of his who was a veterinarian who bought it for his kids. Never paid my dad. I remember my dad talking about that you know, he was supposed to get paid, but he never did. And his kids played with it. And one of his sons recently ran for political office and I think was elected. And I sent him an email saying, hey, do you still have that train set? And he said, yeah, we might. And I said, I sure would like to get it back. And he was amenable to that. I'd love to get it back. I don't know what it's going to look like, but my brother worked hard on it, built it. Wouldn't that be cool to get it back and give it to my brother? I mean, he figures it's long gone, but apparently it still exists. I think the guy said it's up in their attic. So anyway, I'll pursue that. Well, in the Lizard That Ate main town, there's also a scene where I'm appearing on television. We had this television where the guts were gone with a glass front, and I crawled inside of the television and continued to be the television announcer talking about the destruction of Main Town. It was kind of a takeoff of your typical Japanese monster movie. And I haven't seen the movie in decades, so I really couldn't tell you if it was any good. It's probably okay for kids, you know. That was filmed with my mother's 8mm camera. That's where you'd have a magazine that had a 16mm film in it, and you'd film on one side for 25 feet, and then you'd flip it over and film on the other side, so you'd end up with 50 feet of film. They would actually film it on the 16mm, and then at the lab they would slice it, cut it in half, and give you two 8mm that they would splice together. And since my mother was into photography, both film and still, I know that had an influence on me and both my brothers. I know it certainly did me. And my oldest brother, he's an accomplished photographer, does some really great work with landscapes, and he likes to photograph Western stuff, and he's real accomplished with that. Talks about doing a coffee table book, which hopefully someday he will. So with that, a couple of courses in cinematography in college, I did think, yeah, you know, it'd be fun to be a filmmaker. But it's a real tough, very competitive business, and what I did over the course of the years is short things. Nothing was any good, never had any help, didn't have any crew. When we went on vacation a few years ago, we filmed The Environmentalist, and nobody wanted to act, so I said I'll be the actor. And it's funny, during the course of the years doing short films, never could find anybody really who wanted to act, so I often ended up being the actor. And I kind of like being the actor. I'm pretty good at going with the flow and getting things right and getting into the character. One time we were the Salada Creek gang for an old western town in San Antonio. My brother and I and I don't know, half a dozen, 8 of our friends, and I wrote a bunch of scripts for that, and we acted those scripts out. I played the kid because I looked so young, and my brother played Black Bart because he always had a beard, and we'd get out there and have the gun show, shoot them up, and we were pretty popular. A lot of people would come to see us. And we had shows on the hour, every hour, all day long on Saturday and Sunday. This was during the summer months. It was a summer job while I was still in college. And that was fun. Also, bears to mention that I was the only one willing to do stunts. I wrote some scripts where the kid gets shot on the roof of a building and falls off the roof of a building into a wagon full of hay, or falls into the water trough. I did all those stunts. I didn't have a problem with that. I'm pretty physical, and it's just a matter of planning it out and, you know, making sure you know where you're going to land and everything is cool. And added some action to the skits. I mean, you go to a lot of western towns, the skits are a bunch of talking and then gunplay, and that's it. Well, we had me getting shot and rolling off the roof and landing in the hay, or getting shot, falling in a water trough. I remember one of the biggest mistakes we made. We had written a bank robbery skit, and we were going to start by shooting the guns in the bank and running out, and then the good guy would come and get them. I also played a marshal, and so I was the good guy. I wasn't in the bank, but the other guys, the bad guys, they were in the bank. So anyway, they were in there, and they fired off their rounds and then came running out the bank. Well, what they didn't think about is inside that little building, firing those guns was the wrong thing to do, because they couldn't hear a word from that point forward. The whole rest of the script, they just had to kind of ad-lib. They couldn't hear, because because their ears were ringing so bad. We didn't think about that. We made our own blank loads, and we like to make them hot because the crowd always liked the noise. The louder the better. But sometimes it was a little too loud. I know one of the guys in our group, he loaded shotgun shells and he fired a shotgun and just about, this is a blank, just about took his toe off. He was wearing a boot and he had the gun up over his leg, leaning back, and he was going to fire the shotgun, you know, to get the marshal's attention or something. And well, he hit his toe, and it was serious. This is with a blank. People don't realize what comes out of there with a blank. Anyway, we did pretty well, and the establishment that hired us, they wanted to keep us on, so even though we had to go back to college, a bunch of us, we did some weekends in the fall, as I recall, driving from college to do the shows, but that didn't last because it was just too much. But it was fun. And as far as I know, there's no footage of that other than what tourists might have taken. We did a lot of stills, but we didn't do any film footage, I don't believe. So anyway, look for me, I will find you. Proceeds. I'm enjoying it. It is a little hard to get people excited. That's what I'm running into, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just going to continue as though I know what I'm doing. My friend in Austin is on board. He's getting excited about it, and I've known him for a lot of years. And one thing he said to me one time, he said, if Douglas says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. And he's absolutely right. I'm dead serious. If I get started on something, I'll do it until somebody stops me or until the phone rings, whichever comes first.